Okay, so we are recording now. Thank you everybody for joining. I'm Jenny Kramer. I am the Bicycle and Pedestrian Coordinator at KDOT, and I manage the Transportation Alternatives program. Just wanted to do a little housekeeping before we get started and to allow more people to join. I think we have about 40 people who maybe signed up to participate today. So this beginning part is more just housekeeping and some FYIs, navigation that I will quickly run through. All right, I just wanted to draw your attention to our webpage. This is where you will find the information you need to submit a concept paper, which we will talk about in more detail. So the website has been posted on the press release and emails that have gone out. But if you ever need to find our webpage, just if you can locate the Kansas Department of Transportation homepage, then the rest is pretty easy. You just, I'm going to run through it really quick just to show you some of the features and resources available.
That's what you're talking about. So it was costume for me. It was your normal. Cool. What was the name of the subdivision? All
right. I think I found the person not muted and muted them. Maybe make sure you're muted. If I think most of you are. It sounds pretty quiet. All right. So this is the homepage for KDOT. You can always find the bike page by clicking on the little bicycle and on the right side. If you click on that, then you will arrive at the home page. From here, you'll be able to see our new vision and goals that were developed from the active transportation plan that is currently in draft form. We're working through to get a final document, hopefully in the next month or two. But once you're here, you can find the Transportation Alternatives Program link right here. But then just want to draw your attention to other resources as well. This is where the active transportation plan link or page will be once that is available. I mean, there is stuff there now, like some great PSAs and other videos and tools you can look at, but a lot will be added on there soon. And then you can order your bicycle maps or share with community members, or if you have an organization that you want to hand them out at, you can do that too. Here's a link to funding opportunities for active transportation. And when I say active transportation, I mean primarily bicycling and walking, but it includes many different options that you've maybe become more aware of, like scooters and roller skating and skateboarding. Okay. And then also some planning resources. So this is where you can find some great guidance documents on building bicycle and pedestrian facilities. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the Transportation Alternatives Program. This is where you'll be able to find the concept form, be able to download it and complete it, and then just email it to me. Be sure to, if you have attachments, to put it all together in one PDF. And this is also, there are links to some maps that we will discuss later that will be of use. And then down here in the key documents, I'll be adding to this. And we have the slides available there right now. I do plan to probably give some more updated slides after this meeting, or at least on Monday, recordings to this webinar. There's the KDOT district maps and area office contacts. So if you want to get in touch with your district or area engineer, frequently asked questions about the TA program. And then again, the concept form. We'll be posting the TA and Safe Routes to School guidance documents and scoring rubrics there soon. All right, so going back to the slides. So this is the last webinar. But don't fret if you need to leave early, or if you have other community members who you think would benefit from this information. Like I mentioned, the recording will be available on the website I just showed you. And hopefully that'll be on Monday, we can get those posted. I've already introduced myself. I'm Jenny Kramer. I'm the bicycle and pedestrian coordinator at KDOT. And with us, we have Matt Messina. Matt, did you want to introduce yourself?
Hello.
Yeah, Matt Messina here. I work with Jenny at KDOT in our Bureau of Transportation Planning. I've been in her position before, being in charge of running the TA program. Happy to transition it off to her. You're in good hands, and I'll be here to help if you have any questions. I'll also be monitoring the chat box during this, making sure that we address all your questions and comments, and also making sure that participants don't have any issues getting in and out or having access with their microphones or anything like that. So if you need any help or anything, just shoot me a message and I'll try and address it. Thanks.
Thank you, Matt. And if at any time you have a question about what I'm talking about, or just something related to the program, feel free to type it in the chat and we will be able to monitor that as we go along. Try to answer. There will also be a Q&A at the end that you can save them for as well if you like. Okay, I mentioned the Kansas Active Transportation Plan. The last time Kansas developed a plan, it was the Bike Ped Plan, and that was in 1995. So it really needed to be revised. We started this process in early 2020. It's been a huge undertaking with a ton of public involvement. Thanks to anybody on the call that was able to participate in that and help with that development. And like I mentioned, hopefully we will have something published in the next month or two, as well as some great toolkits around planning in small and medium-sized communities, on active tourism, and on economic impact assessments, crash analyses, some things like that. So stay tuned. David LaRoche, I didn't see that he had joined yet. He's our.
Yeah, he actually wasn't able to join today's.
Okay. So we are going to talk about some of the changes. If you haven't heard, a new transportation bill passed at the end of last year. There's a lot that's still unfolding that we're figuring out, but the bipartisan infrastructure law basically is what the TA falls under now. That's the new name. If you go onto the slides on the webpage, that fact sheet link there is a live link, and most everything related to TA will continue, but there are a few small changes, and you can see those in the fact sheet. But like I mentioned, we will discuss some of those changes today as well. With this new law, we are expecting additional funding and some changes to the apportionment of our funding. Okay. All right, so getting into what's new. Different from how we did in the past, we now are allowing non-urbanized areas of WAMPO and MARC to apply. So if you're not familiar with those acronyms, WAMPO is the Wichita Area Metropolitan Policy Organization, and MARC is the Metropolitan Policy Organization for the Kansas City region. And so there are maps that we will go over in a minute that shows those areas, who's in it, and it's based on the federally or the FHWA adjusted areas. So I'll walk you through that briefly in a slide or two, a few slides. Concept papers are due March 4th. So this is a little different than in the past where we've only done the concept paper process once before. So the last call is the first time we introduced this new process, and they were the call was released in June. Those concept papers were due, I think, in maybe July or around July sometime. And then the full applications were due in November. And what we heard from our communities is that it was a little awkward timing because the cities are already deciding what their budgets are come June. So applying for this funding would require an amendment to their budgets in terms of covering the non-participating costs like preliminary engineering, right-of-way utilities, but then also the 20% match. So hopefully this aligns better with city budget planning. And small MPOs are also now eligible to apply. So this includes Flint Hills, Topeka Metro, Lawrence, and St. Joseph for the Kansas communities. We are hoping to provide some potential, there may be some potential for flexible matching options because now the 80-20 split required by FHWA is at a program level versus a project level. So favorable consideration will go to communities that who maybe can exceed the 20% because that could allow for some flexibility with smaller communities, specifically under 5,000, but that won't be determined for until we have the whole picture. But then also looking at other potential options with the new bill that could become available. The main take home with that is you will need to show 20% match, the commitment from your community, but definitely don't not submit a concept paper if you don't think your community can cover the match. It will allow us to know what projects are being considered out in Kansas, and if for whatever reason the TA is not a right match, or if there aren't any flexible options that could fit the community, if you can't cover that 20% match, we can look at other options like cost share and possibly state bike funding in the future. I hope that was clear as mud. The main thing is we're figuring it out. And then when you are identifying what facilities you want to implement in your community for bicycle and pedestrian transportation, make sure you are looking at guidance documents like from AASHTO or FHWA, and when possible, please, it would be helpful to have that resource maybe in some parentheses for us, so we know that how you based your decision and that it was thoughtful and the best facility or strategy for your situation. And then another exciting development is that Safe Routes to School now covers K through 12. It was K through 8. Okay, so just briefly, the reason we started requiring a concept form prior to application is because in the past, communities would spend a lot of time on their application. It's quite, it's very involved, and if you want to have a strong competitive application, it can take quite a lot of time, effort, and research to complete that application. But then we would receive applications that maybe would have been stronger if they had done something slightly different with sidewalk widths or side of the street, or maybe their cost estimates weren't accurate. So instead of denying the award as a result of these issues, and then with the only option then being to reapply during the next call, we implemented the concept form as kind of like a intent to apply, but with the main thing being you can present your concept, provide as much detail as you have, including cost estimates, and then we review that and we'll provide feedback to communities on your concept, determine eligibility of the applicant, sponsoring agent, and also provide feedback if the cost estimates we think are completely off, or maybe items such as ditches or other expensive features in the environment that could increase the cost. If those weren't considered, we would be able to look at that and recommend that you do consider those. We did work through a concept paper just for your reference, just giving an idea of what we're talking about. It should be brief, concise, but but definitely have all the details needed that we know exactly what you're talking about. So here is an example. Make sure you're including project limits so we can go on Google Earth, find it, look at it, the length, and then here we have where you describe the project need. So here we have on this segment of the road, there's been growth in businesses and then consequently traffic. However, the sidewalks are crumbling, they're not ADA compliant, there's no safe crossings at the intersection, the parking spots are forward facing diagonal, creating dangers with backing out. So our scope of work then is to install ADA compliant sidewalks and ramps. To slow down the traffic, we are proposing curb cuts or bulb outs, reducing the lanes from 4 to 3, so road diets, and then wanting to explore upgrading the signals. That would include a passive pedestrian detection. So this would detect a pedestrian before, like without them having to push a button, and also making sure it doesn't change before the pedestrian is out of the crosswalk, that kind of thing. And then possibly some right and left turn restrictions. And then installing raised crosswalks at the intersection, that is also a great way to calm traffic. And then looking at maybe instead of doing forward, diagonal, looking at back in or parallel, all these things would reduce the speed. So then you have an easy argument to reduce the posted speed limit to 20 miles per hour through the commercial district, where people are going to be walking and maybe biking. Whereas often it's like 30 or more, and that is often too high if you have people. All right, and so then the next section is describe existing conditions. So this just gets into more detail. So we describe the need, there's more businesses, more traffic. This gets more into really looking at like what is the current situation. So looking at things, whatever data you have that's relevant, what's the population, the annual average daily traffic, if you have it, the current posted speed limit, the road configuration, like it's 4 lanes, 3 lanes, 2 lanes, and then just maybe some information on crashes, such as like property or injury or fatalities, including that, and then maybe what the situations were, and even anecdotally, if you've had near misses, being able to talk about that can also be powerful. You can bring in information such as the poverty level, the percent of those living in poverty, or the percentage of those who don't own a vehicle. Just really establishing that understanding of your community, and therefore why what you're proposing makes sense. And then the last box before we have some additional items we can attach is the cost estimates. So here we say, if possible, we really do mean that. We know the turnaround is pretty quick, and we want these cost estimates to be as accurate as possible. And that often involves, usually involving engineers, walking, biking, at least driving the routes, identifying, width of sidewalks or multi-use paths or side paths, bike lanes, those kinds of things. But for this, just doing the best you can, as if you have some conceptual designs, or hopefully you've talked to some engineers about potential cost of the project based on maybe a formula like $1,000 per, I don't know, square feet. Don't use that. That probably doesn't make sense at all. Anyway, and then the breakdown here is very similar to what the application cost estimate table will ask for. So identifying what the construction cost and the construction engineering, or also known as inspection costs, will be. Those are important numbers to come up with, because from that you can maybe determine the preliminary engineering costs of that project. And let's see, and then the right-of-way utilities, it's going to vary a lot by project. And again, your city or an engineering consultant will be able to maybe estimate that. Assume right-of-way it usually is necessary at some level. So then, based on the participating, which is the construction and the inspection, TA funds can cover 80% of those costs. So 80% TA and then the 20% match to give you the total project cost. Local responsibility, we have that here. So KDOT responsibility will be that 80% of the construction and CE. Local responsibility will be the 20% plus the any non-participating, such as preliminary engineering or the design, also known as design, and the right-of-way utilities, if that's applicable. Okay. So, and then the last one is, if possible, attach additional items. So this could be maps, photos, if you have any conceptual designs, or even if the community has already started developing preliminary designs, definitely attach that to provide a picture of what you're hoping to accomplish. So there's a question, is an engineer required to qualify for the grant? Oh, sorry. I wondered if I moved my cursor around. I thought about that after the last webinar, and obviously I am. I will stop doing that. Okay. An engineer isn't required to qualify for the grant, so you can apply. Your application is going to be a lot more, is going to be a lot stronger and be able to demonstrate your community's ability to be successful with a federal project. I mean, even if you can get, if your city has a consulting firm on retainer, I think that's the words, maybe they can get involved. Sometimes consultants will help out, hoping they might get the job to do the design. So that is an option. Once, if you are awarded, then the city would hire a consultant right away to start the designs. But if you can get an engineer involved, that is going. Otherwise, it would be difficult to get, especially those cost estimates, accurate in enough detail. Here's an example, and I'm going to just keep my hands off the mouse now. Here's an example of a map. This is from Coffeyville. And I use this example a lot because we like how they not only show what they are proposing, but how it ties into existing infrastructure. And not only that, they include how that was funded, like what the programs were. So paints a nice picture of what they've accomplished, what they hope to accomplish, and how it connects into an overall network. Here's some examples of pictures demonstrating the need and existing conditions. So this was a community who wanted to apply for Safe Routes to School master plan and then construction. So obviously no sidewalks. There's a crosswalk that's not accessible, and kids are having to walk in the street. So I'm happy to report this community successfully got funded to do construction, and there are sidewalks and nice crossings now. It's another example of a community. They happen to have these designs done, and this is especially nice for like our engineer reviewers who understand this. Okay, so those are just some examples. If you know, there are some tools that you can go in and, Matt, what is that one tool where it's the My Street, or where you can put bike lanes and sidewalks based on the width of the street?
Yeah. Street Mix. I'll put the link in the chat.
Right. So even those little kind of diagrams, it allows you to, this is the width of my street, this is how wide the road is, and you can just play around and put in the different elements so that we can have that visual of what you're hoping to accomplish. All right, so as mentioned, the project concepts are required, so we will not send an application to you until, or we will only send applications to those who have submitted a concept paper. And we will review those concept papers as soon as we receive them. So the deadline is March 4th, but you can submit it at any time. And as mentioned, all the details don't have to be worked out, but as much as you're able, we'll be able to provide the best feedback with more details. But definitely, you don't have to wait till March 4th. The sooner you send it to us, the sooner we'll be able to review, provide feedback, and get you that application packet. So definitely encourage it earlier so that it can be spread out and we can have a better idea of what we're looking at in terms of applicants. Okay, and the absolute deadline that I will get those application packets to you is March 31st. And then you will have till May 13th to complete that. Once you complete your concept paper, especially if you really start thinking about it and getting the details, the actual application isn't that much more. So you're already halfway there, at least, probably more than halfway there to completing an application. And that's another benefit of the project concepts. Say the applications weren't due till May 13th. It could be easy for, say, a community to put off developing the application till just 2 or 3 weeks before it's due. This way you've got like 3 months to really be thinking through the projects you're hoping to have funded. Once we get the applications, we have our review teams that start going through it, and engineers looking at the projects, looking at private property, railroad crossings, those type of things, and hoping to announce awards in the summer. This is basically everything I've just talked about, but in a handy table. That is the address you will send the application to. And we do require you to send a paper copy and a PDF. And again, whenever you send something, if you can combine your documents, if you have a Word document and images, just combine it all into a PDF. So that way we don't have to do it and we know exactly the order you're wanting us to review it. Okay. Any questions so far? I get into overview. All right. So some basics of the TA program. It is federally funded. The projects must be related directly to surface transportation. And to answer Karen's question, it still does include the historic, still has the historic and archaeological category, as well as the scenic environmental. Those are two categories that fewer people are aware of that transportation alternatives can fund, and we will get into a little bit more detail with that. The most popular or common applications we see are for pedestrian and bicycle active transportation, non-motorized projects, as well as the safe routes to school. And we're going to get into each one of those in more detail. It is a highly competitive selection process, and communities should be aware from the beginning that you must comply with federal and state requirements. But one thing I want to emphasize is that you aren't left in the cold to figure it all out. There's the bicycle and pedestrian staff, Matt and I, but then also we have our Bureau of Local Projects project managers assigned to these projects who are very well versed in all federal and state requirements related to the grant. And then your consultant has usually been involved in federal grant or federal funding, federally funded projects before as well. So they will be really helpful in walking you through it and demystifying it. So definitely don't be overwhelmed, especially in a little bit, I will be mentioning some of the federal requirements. It's nothing that you'll be left alone to figure out. So some eligible applicants the eligible applicants to apply are local governments. So city, county is typically the most common applicant that we see, cities especially, transit agencies, natural resource public land agencies, school districts, or local education agencies, specifically for non-construction, not construction. Tribal governments, as I mentioned, small NPOs can now apply, and then the non-urbanized members of MARC and WAMPO. So even though with the new bill, there were some changes in eligibility, such as KDOT applying on behalf of a community, that is not something that we will be allowing yet, at least not this round. And also nonprofit entities are not. The urbanized areas of MARC and WAMPO, they receive their own suballocation of funds, and they have their own competitive process. And that is why they are not eligible to apply. And the Kansas Department of Wildlife and Parks also receives TA funding. Their call for projects should come out in November and is very focused on, as it's called, recreation trails. So trails in parks and trailheads and those types of things. Okay, so getting in a little more detail with the WAMPO and MARC, FHWA adjusted NPO in urbanized boundaries. So this is specifically for WAMPO. And it's kind of hard to see the cities on this map. So I did list the communities that are outside of the urbanized boundary, which is the green, but within the purple. So Sean, in a small community where the recreation program is 501c3 but funded through the school, how would that work?
You need to partner with your, depending on what the project is you're proposing, you need to partner with your local community or school as the primary sponsor, and you can be the secondary sponsor.
And I don't, and since you mentioned the school, I don't know if you're specifically interested in a safe versus school project or a construction project such as a trail, since you're a recreation program. If it is for building a trail, you would want to partner with your city or county. Okay. Oh, it's a greenway trail. Yeah, so for construction, the school wouldn't be doing that, but yeah, the city or county. And if you have options for match like that, that's even better. Okay, and then here's the MARC, so the Kansas City region, and then here are most of the communities, or the communities that I could find that were in the non-urbanized area. Matt, do you think we should go over that tool really quick?
I think we've got the time, yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and just, it's kind of a fun map anyway, so if you like maps and want to explore a little bit more, those maps are live linked to this FHWA site. And hopefully it won't be too slow. Here we go. So just a really quick tutorial on how to use this. So if it is relevant to you, you can hop in here and look around. So you'll want to go under the MPO and air quality, scroll down or click down here on the FHWA adjusted urban area. And then over to the right, you'll see like sources, legend, data, click on layers, and then just, click on, I mean, you could pretty much just click on everything that's here. As it's zoomed out, everything will be relevant. And then you can click on the little microscope with the plus sign, and say we want to go into the WAMPO area, just do a little box around it. And that's an easy way to zoom in exactly where you want to go. And then just, you know, continue to zoom in until, oops, you need to press the redraw map for those things. But I need to recheck it here, hold on. So mostly it's like the MPO boundary, you want that to show up. Populated place. If you want to see the railroad, you can do that too, which is helpful. All right. Oops. Make sure if you want to pan that you hit the hand first. Otherwise, it'll do whatever you had on there last. Okay, so as you can see now, you can see where the railroads are, the communities outside of the urbanized boundary, and be able to confirm where your community is if this is relevant to you. Okay. Okay. Sean, that sounds like a great project, and we really like to see connections with what would be considered recreation trails and transportation networks. I don't know how many of you have a situation like that in your community, but whenever possible, I try to get off the road and on the trails to get where I need to go, whether that's to the grocery store or to a restaurant or to work. So looking at yeah, the in-city sidewalks, bike lane kind of networks, and connecting to your trails is a great amenity for your community, increases quality of life. And so hopefully we will see that concept coming in. And if you want to discuss it, any of you, if you want to discuss your concept, your project in more detail, have questions about what to or not to include, definitely email me and we can set up a Teams meeting. We can get on the Google Maps and Google Earth and look around that way. Okay. All right. So as mentioned, we have the different categories. Safe versus school now includes K through 12. We know the high school environment can be a pretty scary place, mostly the parking lot, which yeah, is another story, but definitely going in and out of high schools, they often don't have the same kinds of, you know, speed zone or crossings available to them as the lower grades, but I don't know why. Like, it seems like it's even more needed. So now our program covers K through 12, and that can be explored with our funding. Okay, just give a little glimpse of what could be considered ineligible. This is not comprehensive, and even with this, some gray areas, but signing, landscaping, lighting as independent projects, so not tied to, say, like a streetscape project where you're improving, like, say, a downtown, beautifying it, putting in some crossings or sidewalks or curb cuts. Like, if you are doing that, then landscaping and signing and lighting are all eligible. So just keeping that in mind. And then just some other examples that you can read. Just briefly wanted to go over the apportionment for this period of the call. So we're talking federal fiscal year, and that is October 1 through September 30th. And so the federal fiscal year 2023 will begin this October 1st. And since it's covering a 2-year, we're estimating 18 million. We don't know yet because of the new bill, because it's supposed to be increased. We're hoping to have like a higher level. We're also maybe expecting additional funds from 22 that can maybe carry into this call. But hopefully we'll learn that soon. But based on 18 million, we are expected to sub-allocate 59% of that based on population. So specifically populations less than 200,000, and then breaking it down even further, expecting a 50-50 split then from 5,001 to 200,000, and then 5,000 or less. So you can see that the rural areas are, there's a good amount that we are expected to sub-allocate to more rural areas, and so hopefully we will get a lot of applications from communities under 5,000. And then there's the any area, so that's more like statewide efforts. That would include what Kansas Department of Wildlife and Parks applies for through, like right now we're funding the Flint Hills Trail improvements and currently eliminating a detour on the way to Ottawa, and it involves building a bridge over an active railroad. So pretty big deal. That would be an example in the any area, as would be the non-urbanized areas of the Mark and Wampo, because they also have access to the funds that go directly, the TA funds that go directly to Wampo and Mark. We keep them in the any area category for that reason. And that it was 50-50 here, and so that dropped to 41%. But getting more into the categories and some examples of projects for each category. This would be the ped and bike, non-motorized transportation. So separated painted bike lanes, so traffic calming, safer crossings, ped islands, pedestrian signals. And here we had a reduction in lanes from 4 to 2 that then was able to include bike lanes. So it's just some examples, some visual inspiration, hopefully. Some more examples we have here in a very downtown commercial area, the highly visible pedestrian crossings. You've got lots of great lighting, the curb cuts, and for accessibility, bike racks, benches. And then here on the right, a really important type of project, which is a side path that has accessible crossings, and it runs the key feature here is that it runs parallel to a busy road, but allows pretty high level of separation from that traffic. So the person who isn't in a car has also the most direct and efficient route available to them too, while staying safe. And in this case, it is a side path from the high school to downtown. This is an example of of rails to trails. So like, I don't know if you've seen this Kansas Rails Trails map. It is on our Kansas bicycle map, but it does provide a vision of what we can have in the state based on abandoned rail lines. And if you look in the yellow on the yellow lines, those are completed rail trail projects. So over in the eastern part of the state, you can see the Flint Hills Trail and the Prairie Spirit Trail. So both great connectors and highly used by long distance cyclists and locals, connects towns. So something to think about if you're in communities with abandoned rail corridors, but also like thinking about if you are what would we call like a trail town, whether next to Flint Hills or Prairie Spirit, or even the US bike routes. We have US bike route 76 and 66 in our state that are signed out and used by long distance cyclists. Thinking about how you can invite those folks using the US bike route or the rails to trails, how you're inviting them into your town and making your community more bicycle and pedestrian friendly. It's a great opportunity to increase economic growth. And if you want to know an example, good example, Sterling, Kansas. They're about a mile off the US bike route, and are doing a lot to attract cyclists into their town. Come stay the night, eat at the restaurants, they have showers, bathrooms, making it very inviting, and it benefits the community members too. This is a tool that can be pretty handy if you're just thinking about what types of interventions might work best in your community. It's a really fun tool because these images you see when you click on it, they're actually like little moving videos, but then it also provides the studies that have been done showing the improved safety for each of the interventions. So diving a little deeper into Safe Routes to School, we have the planning and non-construction categories. So this funding can be used to develop a Safe Routes to School master plan for your community. In some cases where the community is really small, it could serve as a community-wide plan, but definitely looking at within 1 to 2 miles of the school. And once you have developed this master plan and it is approved by your city council or county commissioners, then you will, and if you already have one that's been approved, you're eligible for then the education, encouragement, enforcement, and evaluation activities category, and also new as of, both of these are new as of the last call around preliminary engineering or design on routes identified in your master plan. So anything that you propose in these second bullets, like around education and programming or the design, should tie directly to what is in your master plan. And then this just goes into a little more detail on the funding levels. So for the plan, you can request up to $20,000 to get that developed. For the education programming, so all of the E's except for engineering, up to 50,000, preliminary engineering up to 75, and just a reminder, there still is a 20% cash match required on participating, which would participating in these cases, and we'll get into this in a little bit, are related specifically to the activity, so the plan, education programming, or PE. If you do have a Safer School plan and you want to have your routes designed, just keep in mind that you will be expected to follow the consultant selection guide. This is a guide available through KDOT. It's actually, there's great templates. We have staff who will send you those forms, and in the process you'll follow. So it's not too overwhelming. Okay, and then for construction, if you have a Safe versus School master plan and then you want to just start building the facilities that you have outlined in there and on the routes identified, you just select the Safe versus School construction category. I just want to point out, say you don't have a Safe versus School master plan, but your community desperately needs sidewalks and safe crossings because the kids are walking in the street or they don't have safe crossings. You do not have to have a Safe versus School master plan to apply for those projects. You just select the bike ped category, and definitely emphasize that the need is for kids to get to and from school safely. Diving in a little bit more to the historical. If you are interested in this, we do have a contact with the Historical Society who can answer questions and who would be reviewing your application. If an example of this, this is the only one I can think of, Matt probably knows more, but like sometimes say a train depot station like can be redone for like city offices, like in Strong City, and I think in Ottawa too. Those projects were funded with TA funding. Yeah,
that's exactly right. So historic transportation related facilities, which are buildings, and then also this is what the pot of funds we use, or not pot of funds, but the category we use for historic brick streets as well.
Mm-hmm. So if your community has, like, say, a main street that's brick and your brick needs to be redone, this funding could pay for that. However, your project will be a lot more, your application will be a lot more competitive if you don't just include the redoing of the brick streets, but also tie in maybe some streetscaping facilities, like, but definitely looking at maybe like including safe crossings, ADA accessible corners, sidewalks, that kind of thing too. I'd like to see kind of a slightly bigger picture than just the redo of the brick road. And this is where the streetscape, the most common one here that is applied for is streetscaping. So that is beautifying the downtown, the main street. So this is where you would get into the lighting and landscaping, just making the overall environment just good looking. And typically you put in sidewalks and curb cuts and crossings. That alone is, I think, a very beautifying type of project, but you can go beyond that, where you really are wanting to attract people to your downtown. And we have some examples of that if that is something you're interested in, that I've compiled a few community applications that I can share. All right, so getting into the local cash match for construction specifically, the match has to be 20% cash match, so on participating, so costs related to the construction and inspection. Costs related to right-of-way utilities or preliminary engineering don't count towards the match because it's not like participating. That is 100% the city or county's responsibility. Likewise, with the non-construction projects, the 20% cash match would be on participating items related to that. So as we discussed, developing the plan, doing the education programming, or the preliminary engineering. And as we mentioned before, for both of these, there is the potential that there might be flexibility with the match for communities under 5,000, depending on what comes out with the new bill and what we see with applications maybe in larger communities on match contributions. Oh, you have a question from Micah. Would the scenic environmental category cover installing water systems on park grounds that do not have water access? I don't know the answer to that. Do you, Matt?
No, that's a tough one and certainly a first. So it sounds a whole lot more recreational trails program relatable, which is administered by Kansas Wildlife Parks. But we can look into it because usually what's eligible in that program is also eligible in TA, just not the focus and purpose of TA. So we'll look into it and get back to you. But again, that's a first.
Mm-hmm. Well, and there are examples where, say, a community is like redoing where the road and sidewalks, and they have to address some of like the stormwater infrastructure, and because it's part of that larger project, it's covered. So I don't know, like if you're maybe it'd be different if you're building a trail, connecting and going through like a park setting, that if that was part of it, that might make it, if it is eligible, that would make it more competitive anyway.
Right. If it's water related to providing an amenity of the trail users or park users, so like drinking fountain, water bottle filling station, water to a restroom or something, that is what I would imagine could be the eligible element. But for like irrigation, not so much.
Okay, and here's just a little more information. Planning to build a trail in an open lot next to our park grounds, but would like to plant new grass and landscaping and drinking fountains. So there is some trail building.
Yeah. Yeah, so Micah, it seems like you're halfway done with your concept paper. So honestly, if you can, compile that and get it to us, we'll be able to do the best with all your information in one spot and get back to you quickly with everything.
Yeah, and I did tell another community who asked about just the straight loop around their park. If, really thinking about, well, what are the sidewalks leading up to that park trail look like because it is such a huge amenity for their community, for the residents. Are the residents able to get from their homes to the park? And looking at the sidewalk situation from neighborhoods to the parks, and building that in if possible could help also with the competitiveness of the application. And then we had,
yeah, the question from Laura.
Yeah, definitely. It can come from any partner organization. You just have to, there's a resolution of support that will have a template for communities to fill out to include in your application. And that's, you don't have to demonstrate that you have the match for the concept paper, just for the application. And the resolution of support, you would indicate where that 20% match is coming from. And it can be from a nonprofit. We do have a program in our state through Blue Cross Blue Shield pathways, and we're seeing that a lot more often where that community health partner is has funding to provide match on some of these projects. Okay, great. I'd love to see that. Yeah, the buy-in, that more diverse buy-in, whether it be community health, public health, historical, the art partners, those are all options and ways to make your whatever you build even more of a high quality addition to your community. We were talking to one community about building a bridge, and they were getting in touch with looking at the historical components and the art components. And so instead of just building a straight bridge, they were looking at artistic designs for a bridge and how much cooler that would be for the community. So just keeping that in mind. Carly, she did provide a dashboard so you could click on there and see if your community is a Pathways community and what options might exist there to maximize your efforts. Thank you. So this is the slide I was talking about that could be overwhelming for some, but definitely don't be overwhelmed. Again, we're here to help you through these requirements. Public involvement is something most of you are very familiar with and do anyway, but then there are a few other things like the Uniform Act, NEPA, so that's the environmental assessment, the Americans with Disabilities. We do require any facility is ADA compliant, and that's usually, seems like it's been just a no-brainer for every community. But even looking at slope and curb cuts and connectivity, competitive bidding. So just, to be fair and get the best price. And then Davis-Bacon wage rates. This is probably the one I get the most complaints about. Contractors sometimes have a difficult time meeting this requirement because the rates can be higher maybe than they want to pay. But again, your consultant can help you navigate that, and it is a pretty well understood requirement. Here are the project contacts, so don't hesitate to reach out to me at any time. Like I've mentioned, David LaRoche, he's our bike ped regional FHWA representative, who we ask a lot of questions to. Bill Legge, if you are in District 1, you've probably worked with him. So he's our local road engineer. Don Husky is covering as the road team leader for local projects. And if you have questions about Buy America, you can ask her. And then Patrick Zollner, he's our Historical Society contact. Okay, that was a response. And then I included some top design guides. I think we need to update this with a couple more. There is a web page, a web link on the Bike Ped homepage that is a good place to go look for the most up-to-date guidelines available. Acronyms and definitions. If you got lost or if I said an acronym without defining it, I did want to point out that the AARP Community Challenge is open right now. Those applications are due March 22nd. So these are great projects to apply for, especially if you wanted some just quick projects that that provide important amenities to your community members. So someone asked about like a vault bathroom. This would probably be a great grant to apply for that. And I think we've been funded in Kansas for like a porch beautification type project. So if you have any small things that you just want to get built really quick, definitely check this opportunity out. Just learned today that Cost Share is going to be opening up another call February 14th. The application will be available, and mark your calendars for their spring webinar on February 24th. So that's pretty exciting. A lot of communities, if they'll apply for transportation alternatives and cost share, hoping to get one or the other. Cost share definitely promotes bike ped facilities. It's a big part of the program. If you go to their website, you can download or look at maps or list of projects from the past several calls, and you can see exactly what I'm talking about. Okay. Any questions? Let's see. All right, so from Elizabeth, can you please provide a little more detail on the archaeology grants for historic signage? Denotes a direct link to an archaeology dig, but assuming the category is much broader than that. I have very little experience with this. Can you think of examples, Matt, that we've done in the state around this?
It hasn't really been done. So the way that is part of this program is one of its original intents, decades ago, was to fund the archaeological portions of larger roadway projects, which are required to, do the analysis of what you'd be disturbing or going through if you were to construct a major roadway in a certain area. But if you have some sort of project that you think would fall under the archaeological category, throw that in on a concept paper and we'll review it and provide feedback for you. And we can also look for another link to share where a little bit more background is on what those project types are.
Mm-hmm. And then Laura, yes, you can submit more than one concept for sure, and even application. We have typically at least 2 or 3 communities submitting more than one application on projects that are different enough. Like in some cases, you might have a project that can tie into each other. So then it's better to do like one concept or one application and break it into phases. But if it is very different, such as a safe versus school, non-construction, so like you want to apply for a master plan, but then you also want to build some sidewalks and crossings, those would be separate. Encouraged. For existing multi-use paths, can a community apply for pedestrian lighting to be installed on existing multi-use paths?
No, that wouldn't be eligible for this, but still submit that as a concept form, because one of the other intents of those is to have it on file to find other programs and funding sources where that may be eligible, such as the AARP one that Jenny promoted a moment ago.
Yeah, that's a really great tip, Matt. And we do encourage folks to submit concept papers, even outside of this call, because I do collect those and keep track of them. And even just this morning, I was following up on 3 or 4 concept papers that were submitted last year, just to see if those communities were wanting to submit as part of the application. And at least one had gotten a cost share, so it wasn't relevant anymore. But it's possible that with state bike ped funding, that there could be opportunities for, like, what do we call it, Matt? That where we would do like a demonstration project or bike racks, just smaller type facilities, and that could maybe include lighting, some less complicated type of projects and installations.
Yeah. So I forget who asked the archaeological component question, but that's the resource that I just plugged into the chat box, and that'll take you to a section or a page where all the different category eligibilities are available. And the archaeological component is related to the preliminary work needed to be done for building a highway.
That's a great web resource. And just want to put out there too, by submitting a concept paper, that does not obligate you to submit a full application. And even if you submit a full application, that does not require you to accept the award. So at a minimum, yeah, submitting that, if it's a project your community wants to do, even if it's very small, submit that concept paper. And we just, it's nice, it's good to have, even if it's not funded with this particular funding at this time, it's good to have them in our queue for other opportunities. Questions? Right, well, if you do, just again, reach out. Email is the best, and then I can set up a Teams call if needed. Oh, I think we have a question brewing.
Yeah, well, we can hang on, and
yeah.
Don't forget, if someone else has to go, this is the type of stuff that we'll be adding and updating to the frequently asked questions document. So don't feel like you have to wait around to hear this.
Mm-hmm. Whenever you email me with a question too, like I put it in a spreadsheet, and because usually you're not the only one who has that question. And if you want to ask a question, you and not type it, you can unmute and ask it too. Okay, so from Sean, in our small community, we have a big water main project, small school, etc. That 20% match isn't there, but could be there through other grants, fundraising. How does that work?
I guess the way that works is it doesn't really show that strong commitment to having the funds available, which unfortunately sounds, potentially risky. So we've had similar projects like that in the past, where the match, it was intended to do a crowd-funded match support that didn't go as planned, and they never developed the match source and didn't have it from any other program or commitment, so we weren't able to award that project. But yeah, that's a great question. And the new infrastructure bill, certainly has a lot more programs within it than this TA program to, be considering for projects like it sounds like you're referencing there, Sean. So submit that and we'll do our best to help you out if it doesn't end up working out in this program.
Yeah. We do, I mean, we want to see like all of these projects funded, and we try to work with communities the best we can. And even recently we've had situations where bids have come in much higher than the small community was able to plan for or be prepared for. And especially in those cases, trying to allow for flexibility and what options exist. So that's more of an after-funded kind of scenario, but like Matt said, we try to figure out how to get as many of these projects built. All right. Thank you everyone for joining. I do think we've probably about had half folks drop off, which does mean it's more intimate. If you had questions that you were too afraid to ask because the group was too large and it was intimidating, that's not something you have to worry about now. You could even unmute and ask. Oh, here we go. Oh wait, there's a response from Matt to Sean, so make sure you see that. Okay. Okay. The last call for questions. All right, I just got a network unstable network message, but I thank everyone for joining. Again, reach out, and the recordings will be online, as are the slides and other resources, hopefully Monday or Tuesday. Otherwise, have a great weekend and look forward to receiving your concept papers. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.